A black single father took in a girl for just one night, without knowing she was the daughter of a millionaire. You really thought you could take advantage of my daughter and get away with it? Richard Whitmore's cold voice echoed through the phone as Andre held the receiver with trembling hands. I'm going to destroy you and your pathetic family. Andre Souza, 34, worked as a nurse on the night shift and never imagined that a simple act of kindness would turn into the biggest nightmare of his life. 3 weeks earlier, during a violent storm, he had found a young woman soaked and frightened on the street. Without hesitation, he offered her shelter in his modest home, where he lived with his 7-year-old daughter Isabella. The girl introduced herself as Emma, a college student who had lost her wallet and cell phone. For 2 weeks, she lived with them as a family, helping with household chores, playing with Isabella, and forming genuine bonds. Andre never suspected that Emma was actually Sophia Whitmore, heiress to a real estate empire valued at $200 million. Daddy, who's yelling on the phone? Isabella appeared in the kitchen, still in her pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Andre forced a reassuring smile as he hung up, but his heart was racing. Whitmore's threats had been clear: kidnapping charges, destruction of his career, loss of custody of Isabella. What Richard Whitmore didn't know was that Andre had meticulously documented every moment of Sophia's stay. Not because he was suspicious, but because he worked with hospital protocols and was in the habit of recording everything. Every conversation, every tear of gratitude from the young woman, every moment of genuine affection between her and Isabella, everything was carefully filed away. When Sophia left that morning, leaving only a handwritten thank you note, Andre never imagined that 3 days later his life would be turned upside down. The first sign came when he was called to the hospital's boardroom. We received an anonymous complaint about your inappropriate behavior outside of work, said the supervisor, avoiding his eyes. As Andre watched the security guard search his apartment under a suspicious court order, something in his expression remained strangely serene. Isabella clung to his leg, confused and frightened, but he simply stroked her hair and whispered, "Don't worry, daughter. Some very powerful people are about to find out that they have completely underestimated the wrong man." If you're enjoying this story of injustice and don't want to miss the moment when the truth comes out, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will show you that even the richest can be brought down by a simple recording. The persecution of Richard Whitmore didn't take long to intensify. The next day, Andre received a notification from Isabella's school informing him that her tuition had been blocked due to pending legal issues. The same happened with his health insurance, bank account, and even the financing for his small apartment. "Daddy, why did the lady at school say I can't eat in the cafeteria anymore?" Isabella asked as Andre drove her home. Her innocent eyes reflected confusion and fear, feelings he never wanted his daughter to experience because of his kindness. Andre hugged the girl tightly, feeling the weight of injustice burn in his chest. Richard Whitmore was using his financial power as a weapon, systematically cutting off every aspect of Andre's life. The man didn't just want revenge, he wanted to completely destroy an innocent family. The call came at 2 in the morning. "See how easy it is to dismantle your pathetic little life." Whitmore's voice dripped with venom. "Tomorrow I'm canceling the rest of your contracts. In a week, you'll be out on the street. And that's just the beginning." What Whitmore didn't know was that Andre had grown up in public orphanages, surviving a system that tried to break him at the age of 5. He knew intimately the feeling of having everything brutally ripped away, of being underestimated by people who judged his worth based solely on the color of his skin and the absence of an important last name. "My father built an empire from scratch," Whitmore continued, his arrogance overflowing through the phone. "You're just another freeloader trying to hold on to what isn't yours. Sophia was vulnerable, confused, and you took advantage of the situation." Andre remained silent, letting the man reveal every layer of prejudice and privilege that shaped his worldview. Every word was being recorded on the app he had discreetly downloaded after the first threat, a habit developed over years of working in hospital environments where documentation was a matter of life and death. "People like you," Whitmore spat out the words, "need to be reminded of their place in society. You thought you could play happy family with a Whitmore? My daughter is worth more than you could ever hope to earn in 10 lifetimes." The next morning, Andre received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Sandra Martinez, a civil rights lawyer he had met years ago during a discrimination case at the hospital, knocked on his door with a determined look on her face. "I've heard rumors about your situation," she said, stepping inside without waiting for him to invite her in. "Richard Whitmore isn't just known for his wealth, Andre. He has a history of using legal intimidation to silence people he considers unsuitable for his family. Sandra revealed that this wasn't the first time Whitmore had gone after someone. 3 years earlier, he had financially ruined a young teacher who had fallen in love with his niece. 2 years before that, he destroyed the career of an artist his eldest daughter had met in Paris. The pattern is always the same, Sandra explained, spreading documents across Andre's coffee table. Threats, financial persecution, legal pressure until the person disappears from their lives. And it always works because his victims are ordinary people without the resources to fight back. Andre looked at the papers, then at his daughter playing quietly in the corner of the room, clearly sensing the tension in the air. Something in his expression changed, not to despair or fear, but to a cold determination that Sandra recognized immediately. He doesn't know who he's messing with, Andre muttered, a small spark of something dangerous flashing in his eyes. People like Whitmore live in such privileged bubbles that they forget there are other kinds of power besides money. While Richard Whitmore quietly celebrated what he believed to be another easy victory against an inferior family, Andre discreetly opened a folder on his computer. 2 years of meticulous documentation of every moment Sophia had spent in his home, every tear of gratitude, every genuine smile exchanged with Isabella, a story completely different from the version his billionaire father had constructed in his prejudiced mind. Each new threat only strengthened something inside him that his oppressors couldn't see, a silent force fueled by the very injustice they tried to impose, preparing to reveal truths that would shake the Whitmore empire to its gilded foundations. Andre spent the next 3 days working discreetly with Sandra Martinez, turning her small apartment into a makeshift operations center. While Isabella slept, they analyzed every recording, every document, every digital footprint Whitmore had left behind during his threats. "Look at this," Sandra pointed to the laptop screen, her eyes shining with discovery. Whitmore has used the exact same intimidation tactics in at least 4 cases over the last 5 years. Always following the same script: financial isolation, legal pressure, and systematic harassment. What they had uncovered was a frightening pattern. Richard Whitmore wasn't just a protective father, he was a social predator who used his wealth as a weapon against anyone he deemed unfit for his family. Each victim had been silenced through million-dollar settlements accompanied by confidentiality clauses. But this time he made a mistake, Andre muttered, reviewing the recordings of the threatening calls. He assumed I would be another easy victim, that I would cave in at the first sign of pressure. Whitmore's persecution intensified dramatically. The next morning, Andre discovered that his professional license had been temporarily suspended due to a mysterious ethical investigation. His bank account was frozen for suspicious activity, and his apartment landlord received an anonymous call about troublesome tenants. "Daddy, why were those men taking pictures of our house?" Isabella asked while clinging to his leg. Andre had noticed the private investigators circling the block, documenting his every move, every person who visited his home. But Richard Whitmore had completely underestimated who he was dealing with. Andre wasn't just a dedicated nurse. He had grown up navigating complex welfare systems, learning from a young age to meticulously document every official interaction. His experience with hospital protocols had turned this skill into a silent weapon. "He's trying to break me financially before any legal proceedings," Andre explained to Sandra during one of their evening meetings. "But his every move is being recorded, every threat documented. He's building our case against himself." Sandra smiled with growing admiration. "You realize we have enough material not just for criminal charges, but for a civil suit that could cost him millions?" The decisive moment came when Andre received a direct call from Sophia, the first since she had left. Her voice was heavy with tears and despair. "Andre, I need to talk to you. My father is saying horrible things about you and Isabella. He's planning something terrible." She paused, clearly fighting for words. "He's hired people to plant evidence in your house." Andre felt his blood run cold, but his voice remained calm. "Sophia, are you okay? Where are you now?" "I'm hiding in his office. I overheard a phone conversation. He's going to try to frame you for kidnapping and worse things. Andre, you have to get out of there. Take Isabella and get out of town." Andre looked at Sandra, who had heard the entire conversation on speakerphone. She nodded. She was also recording everything. "Sophia, listen carefully. Don't do anything that could put you in danger. But if you can document these conversations." "I'm already doing that," she whispered. For weeks. I have recordings, emails, messages. Andre, my father isn't just cruel, he's dangerous. He's ruined so many people. The call was abruptly cut off, but the revelation completely changed the game. Now it wasn't just Andre and Sandra against a powerful billionaire. They had an ally on the inside, someone with direct access to Whitmore's strategies and evidence. That night, Andre put Isabella to bed with a serenity she hadn't seen in days. She noticed the change in her father. Daddy, you seem less worried today. Andre kissed her forehead gently. Sometimes, sweetheart, when very bad people try to hurt good people, they end up hurting themselves. And Daddy is just waiting for that to happen. In the kitchen, Sandra organized documents with an efficiency that impressed Andre. Do you realize what we have here? She said, pointing to the piles of evidence. This isn't just a case of harassment or intimidation. It's a criminal pattern of conspiracy, extortion, and abuse of power. Andre nodded, but his eyes revealed something deeper. Sandra, I grew up being underestimated my whole life. By teachers, by bosses, by a system that saw me as just another young black man with no future. I learned that the best defense isn't to fight back with anger, it's to let others reveal who they really are. And Whitmore is revealing much more than he realizes, Sandra agreed, smiling. As they organized the last pieces of evidence for the night, Andre received a text message from an unknown number. It was Sophia. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, he's going to plant drugs in your house. I have a recording of him ordering it. Don't be there. Andre showed the message to Sandra, who immediately began making calls. Let's turn his trap into our biggest victory, she said, her eyes shining with determination. For a moment, when Andre looked out the window and saw the investigators still circling his street, everyone would have thought they were witnessing yet another easy victory for a billionaire over a humble family. But anyone who looked closely at the serene smile on Andre's face would have noticed that it wasn't resignation that moved him. It was the quiet confidence of someone who is about to turn his oppressor's arrogance into the weapon of his own destruction. At 9:45 a.m., Andre sat calmly in a van parked 3 blocks from his home, watching multiple computer screens that transmitted live images from every room in his apartment. Sandra had organized a professional surveillance system during the night, with hidden cameras in strategic angles. They're here, Sandra whispered, pointing to one of the screens showing 2 men dressed as maintenance technicians approaching the back door. One of them was carrying a toolbox that looked suspiciously heavy for a simple plumbing job. Andre adjusted the headphones connected to the directional microphones that had been discreetly installed. Every word, every movement was being recorded in high definition, with automatic timestamps and GPS locations. Are you sure the big guy isn't home? Asked the first man as he forced the lock with a professional master key. Whitmore confirmed that he's at work until noon, replied the second, removing 3 small plastic packages from the toolbox. Let's spread these all over the house. The kids' room, the kitchen, under the mattress. The more obvious, the better. Andre clenched his fists, but kept his breathing under control. Isabella was safe at Sandra's house, completely unaware of the horror her father was witnessing unfold in her home. At 10:05, exactly as Sophia had predicted, Richard Whitmore called the local police station directly. I have information about suspicious drug activity at apartment 17 on Maple Street, he said, using a slightly disguised voice. I believe there is a child in immediate danger. What Whitmore didn't know was that Sandra had anticipated this move. Through her contacts in the judicial system, she had discreetly alerted the Department of Internal Affairs about a possible evidence-planting operation involving a local billionaire. When the police arrived at Andre's apartment, they didn't just find the planted drugs. They also found the 2 technicians still on the scene, an active security camera streaming everything live to civil rights lawyers, and crystal-clear audio recordings of Richard Whitmore coordinating the entire operation. Mr. Whitmore, Detective Morrison said on the phone, his voice laden with a professional coldness that made the billionaire immediately realize that something had gone wrong. We need to talk. Now. Whitmore's first reaction was to try to use his usual influence. Detective, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I'm Richard Whitmore, of Whitmore Holdings. Perhaps we should schedule a meeting through my attorneys. Mr. Whitmore, Morrison interrupted him, you are under formal investigation for conspiracy, planting evidence, attempted framing of an innocent person, and a list of other charges that your attorneys can explain in detail. I suggest you come in voluntarily. Meanwhile, across town, Andre watched in real time as the empire Whitmore had used as a weapon against innocent families was meticulously dismantled. Sandra had coordinated a multi-pronged operation that went far beyond simple defense. The recordings of the threatening phone calls have already been sent to the district attorney's office, Sandra explained, showing a checklist on her tablet. The financial documents Sophia provided us revealed 3 other identical cases in the last 5 years. And best of all. Sandra smiled, opening a new screen. The media already has everything. Channel 7 News, The Tribune, even the Washington Herald. The story will be on all networks at 6 o'clock. Andre watched the images of Whitmore being escorted out of his corporate building by federal agents. The man who had terrorized his family for weeks now walked with his head bowed, surrounded by reporters and cameras, his arrogance transformed into palpable despair. Andre's phone rang. It was Sophia, her voice choked but relieved. Andre, I did it. I have recordings of at least 10 calls where he plans to destroy innocent people. I have emails, bank transfers, everything. Sophia, are you safe? Andre asked, genuinely concerned for the young woman who had risked everything to expose her own father's crimes. I'm moving to my aunt's house in Seattle, she replied. But before I go, I wanted you to know that those 2 weeks at your house were the first time in my life I felt like I was part of a real family. Isabella is lucky to have you as a father. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Andre was at home with Isabella, watching the news while they prepared dinner together. The top story showed Richard Whitmore being indicted on multiple federal charges. Billionaire businessman arrested for conspiracy and systematic persecution of vulnerable families, announced the anchor. Documents obtained exclusively by our station reveal a pattern of abuse of power that spans more than a decade. Isabella looked at her father, confused. Daddy, is that the man who is being mean to us? Andre turned off the television and knelt down to his daughter's height. Yes, sweetheart. But now he can't hurt our family or any other family anymore. How did you know everything would turn out okay? Isabella asked, with the innocent curiosity of a 7-year-old. Andre smiled, thinking of all the nights he had spent awake documenting every threat, every move Whitmore had made, patiently building the case that had just destroyed a corrupt empire. Sometimes, daughter, when very bad people try to hurt good people, they end up hurting themselves. Daddy, just help that happen a little faster. That night, after Isabella fell asleep, Andre received a call from Dr. Martinez. Andre, do you have any idea what you've done? Whitmore didn't just lose his company. The board voted unanimously to remove him. His accounts have been frozen pending a federal investigation. And 3 other families he had persecuted are filing million-dollar civil suits. Andre looked out the window of his small apartment, the same place where it had all begun when he took in a frightened young girl during a storm. 3 months later, the man who had tried to destroy her life out of pure prejudice was facing the complete ruin of everything he had built through intimidation and abuse of power. But the real victory was not Whitmore's downfall. It was the fact that Andre had protected his daughter, preserved his dignity, and proven that justice knows no color, social class, or bank account. It only requires courage, intelligence, and an absolute refusal to accept that injustice is inevitable. While Richard Whitmore spent his first night in a cell, reflecting on how he had completely underestimated a black nurse from the suburbs, Andre kissed Isabella's forehead and silently planned the next steps in their lives, because when the storm passes, it's time to rebuild everything even stronger than before. 6 months after the collapse of the Whitmore empire, Andre Souza was sitting in his new office, no longer the small apartment where it had all begun, but a large, bright space that reflected a complete transformation in his circumstances. The desk in front of him was covered with contracts, job offers, and invitations to speak at universities across the country. Dad, did you see? It's in the paper again. Isabella came running in, holding the morning edition of the Tribune. The headline read, Nurse who stood up to corrupt billionaire opens Civil Rights Institute. His daughter, now 8 years old, had blossomed in recent months, her natural confidence and joy completely restored after the dark period of persecution. Andre smiled, taking the paper and looking at the photo showing the facade of the Andre Souza Institute for Social Justice, an organization he had founded with the millions in damages he had won from Whitmore and donations from supporters around the world. What had begun as a simple personal defense had turned into a national movement against corporate abuse of power. Dr. Martinez is here, Isabella announced, pointing to Sandra walking down the hall with a stack of documents. The lawyer had become not only his partner at the institute, but one of the most respected civil rights advocates in the country after the Whitmore case. "Andre, we have news about our friend," Sandra said, sitting down at the table with an expression of contained satisfaction. Richard Whitmore was officially declared bankrupt yesterday. The last of his assets were auctioned off to pay compensation to the families he persecuted. Andre nodded silently. Over the past few months, he had discreetly followed the systematic dismantling of Whitmore's life. First came the criminal charges that resulted in 3 years in prison. Then came the civil suits that drained every penny of his fortune. Finally, complete social isolation. Former friends, business associates, and even family members abandoned him when the extent of his crimes became public. "He tried to contact me again," Sandra continued. "Third letter this month. He keeps trying to negotiate some kind of deal, offering information about other influential people involved in similar schemes." Andre looked out the window of his office, which overlooked the park where Isabella played during pinball. "People like Whitmore never really understand what they did wrong," he muttered. "They just regret getting caught." The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was an international call, Oxford University offering him a chair in social justice studies, based on his pioneering work documenting institutional abuse of power. Andre had inadvertently become one of the world's leading experts on how individuals can effectively confront systemic corruption. "Are you going to London, Daddy?" Isabella asked, overhearing part of the conversation. "Just for a few months," Andre replied, stroking her hair. "To teach other people how to defend themselves when powerful people try to hurt them." Meanwhile, across town, Richard Whitmore sat in his small prison cell, surrounded by newspaper clippings documenting his downfall. Each headline was a painful reminder of how he had completely underestimated a nurse from the slums. His lawyers had abandoned the case when he could no longer afford their fees. His wife had divorced him and moved to another state under a new name. His children refused to take his calls. The most brutal irony was that Whitmore, who had spent decades using his wealth to silence people he considered inferior, now depended on the charity of the prison system for his basic needs. The man who once owned 3 mansions now shared a 6-foot space with a cellmate who treated him with the same contempt he had shown vulnerable families. On the afternoon of that same Friday, Andre received an unexpected visitor. Sophia Whitmore, now using her mother's surname Morrison, knocked on the door of his institute. She had changed dramatically in recent months, her appearance reflecting a confidence and purpose she had never shown during her years as a privileged heiress. "I wanted to thank you in person," she said, sitting down in the institute's reception room. "Not just for protecting me, but for showing me that there are people willing to do what's right even when it costs them everything." Sophia explained that she had used her remaining inheritance, the asset she had managed to preserve before her father's bankruptcy, to establish a fund to support families who were victims of corporate persecution. She was studying law and planned to devote her career to cases similar to Andre's. "My father always told me that people like you were different, inferior," she said, her tears reflecting years of personal growth. "It took me 22 years to understand that the only person who was inferior was him. And me for believing his lies." Isabella, who had just returned from school, entered the room and immediately recognized Sophia. "Emma!" she cried, running to hug her. To the little girl, Sophia would always be the kind young woman who had shared her pancake mornings and Lego afternoons. Andre watched the reunion with a mixture of emotion and satisfaction. His decision to take in a frightened young girl during a storm had set off a series of events that not only protected his family, but had created waves of positive change that spread far beyond his personal circumstances. That night, after Sophia left and Isabella went to bed, Andre sat alone in his office, reviewing the Institute's reports. In just 6 months, they had helped 43 families confront abuses of power, resulting in total damages of over $8 million and the arrest of 12 corrupt executives. His phone rang once more. It was a CNN reporter requesting an interview for a documentary on the Whitmore case that would be broadcast nationally. Andre declined politely, as he did with most media requests. His victory had not been about fame or recognition. It had been about protecting his daughter and proving that justice knows no class or bank account. When Andre closed his eyes that night, his last thoughts were not about Richard Whitmore rotting in a prison cell, or about the millions of dollars his institute was bringing in, or even about the prestigious offers that arrived weekly from universities around the world. He thought about a storm on a cold night, about a frightened young woman who needed help, and about his instinctive decision to open his front door. That simple choice to show kindness to a stranger had become the foundation for everything that followed. Andre had learned that true revenge is not destroying those who hurt you, it is building something so meaningful and powerful that it renders any damage they tried to cause irrelevant. Richard Whitmore had tried to break a humble family, but he ended up creating a movement that would protect thousands of other families in the future. Isabella slept peacefully in her room, secure in the knowledge that her father was a man the world respected and admired. She would grow up knowing that strength doesn't come from how much money you have or how powerful your enemies are. It comes from always doing what's right, even when it costs everything, and especially when everyone assumes you don't have the power to fight back. The best revenge, Andre had discovered, is to build a life so full of purpose and impact that those who tried to destroy you become nothing more than irrelevant footnotes in the story of your victory. And while Whitmore languished in obscurity and failure, Andre knew that every new family protected by his institute was further proof that kindness, when combined with courage and intelligence, always triumphs over corrupt privilege. If this story of justice and overcoming adversity has touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because in the real world, stories like Andre's are happening every day, proving that anyone can stand up to injustice and win, as long as they have the courage to document the truth and the wisdom to turn suffering into strength to protect others.